What's in a question? Maybe just about everything important. A smart and sharp question should strike up a more engaging conversation. Let's have ourselves a little discussion on relocating to pick up farming. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning. Happy hump day.
Oh, it is a hump day, isn't
Yes.
it? As I barely crawl myself over the hump. The AC is getting to my head.
I know, into my throat as well.
Yeah, it has undesirable consequences. So I know it sounds so counterintuitive, but layers, smart layers, especially if you're going into the office this morning.
Like me.
Yes, it's really
I'm
deceiving.
wearing a
She's wearing
sweater.
it looks like a thick sweater, doesn't
Yes.
it? All right, let's jump into this discussion topic. I can understand the premise of it. It sounds incredibly romantic when you say, forget the hustle and bustle of the city.
Right.
I'm going to be close to nature.
Right.
But everything sounds better. Grass is always greener on the other side until you get there.
Of course.
All right, the question of the day.
Right. So question, turning to farming. Are you in?
No, absolutely not.
Now, there's a term in Korean for returning or turning to farming or choosing to live in rural areas rather than busy city life, which is called 귀농 or 귀촌. So 귀농인, a person who 귀농, is a farmer among those who have moved to a smaller area. And 귀촌인 refers to a person who does not engage in farming among those 귀농인 who return to smaller area.
Okay, so kichone has nothing to do with maybe agriculture. It's just
Right.
about relocating to these more remote areas,
Right.
closer to nature, less buildings. You get the gist.
Right. So have you seen the movie called Little Forest?
The Korean version?
The Korean version or the
Yeah.
Japanese version?
I watched the Korean,
version, right? So
Yeah.
it was originally made by Japan, but a South Korean filmmaker made the movie back in 2018 again.
Yeah.
It's apparently Pida님's favorite. She said that whenever she needs like the healing moment, she turns this movie on and she watches it.
Her love of Kim Tae-ri is very, very real.
Right.
Who was front and center in the Korean adaptation of Little Forest.
Right.
There was kind of an obsession, a cult favorite, if you will, with the
Right.
Korean movie Little Forest because it looked like it promised you a nicer, calmer, collected way of
Peaceful.
life. That's what the movie shows. It's a
Right.
big romanticized story of 귀농.
Right. So it was about a young woman who grew tired of living in the city and returned to her hometown in the countryside, harvesting all the ingredients she eats. So it was farm to table all the way. So the movie was popular and very successful, making a lot of people dream about going back to the rural area to live a peaceful and quiet life.
Headlines are suddenly saying, Little Forest, can you dream it too?
Right.
Can you do it too?
Yeah.
The obsession is very real. Now, the number of people apparently choosing Kinong or Kichon has reached its highest record recently.
Right. Last year, the number of households choosing to return to farming or returning home to the rural area was the highest since the related statistics were compiled.
Okay.
In detail, according to the demographic statistics of returning farmers and returning villages released on June 23rd by the Ministry of Agriculture, the number of households who returned to farming or returned to the village last year was about 379,000. So this is an increase of 5.6% from the previous year, the highest number since the count. In particular, the number of households in their 30s and under and those in their 60s increased by 5% and about 16% respectively from the previous year.
Okay, so still the older generation is more inclined to
Right.
relocate. However, there's a significant uptake in the younger generation, those in their 30s who are supposed to be most economically active, saying, forget this city.
I'm leaving town.
I'm going to choose the simple life. It's interesting how this younger generation has chosen to move to a rural area to farm.
Right.
Considering, I'm assuming a lot of these kids don't have kids, I say, people in their 30s.
People in their 30s, adults.
Compared to those in their
That's us.
60s,
Right.
it feels like children. Anyway, yeah, they might not have the right resources to relocate and just pick up farming. So let's take a look at these specific numbers first.
Right. So the number of returning to farming and returning to rural areas is increasing equally among all age groups, of course. But last year, the increase is particularly noticeable for young people in their 30s or younger. younger. Last year, back in 2021, the number of young people in their 30s or younger who returned to farming alone was about 1,500, which was a record high.
Okay.
This was an increase of 11% compared to just a year ago, back in 2020. Young people in their 30s and younger were also leading the return to farming and turning to rural areas, so both Gwinong and Gwichon. Last year, about 236,000 people in their 30s or younger chose that path of life, accounting for about 46% of the total population who chose to do so.
That's actually really surprising. The numbers are much higher than any of us had expected, and it seems to grab the Agriculture Ministry's attention too, because
of course.
It's unprecedented.
Right.
Did the ministry try to explain why the younger generation made this decision? It can't be just about the romantic angle.
The movie, perhaps? No.
I mean, I'm sure that gets you thinking.
Right.
But when it comes down to it, you have to look at the costs and the benefits of relocating. I'm assuming that it made sense for some of them to relocate.
Of course. So according to the Ministry of Agriculture, they determined that the reason for the increase in the number of young people in their 30s and younger was the result of policies such as the change in young people's perception of rural areas and the farming settlement support project by the government. However, in reality, for the reasons, job and home seem to have had a major impact for them. The main causes are job difficulties due to prolonged COVID-19, especially in this urban area, and housing instability caused by soaring real estate prices. So they had no choice of turning their attention to the other areas than the city.
So the romance comes maybe secondary. It's probably more about practicality. This
reality.
is the only option that some of these people who decide to relocate had. Okay.
So in 2021, 34% of the population who returned home said they had decided to return home for work. Soaring housing prices have also had an impact on their choice. Among the returning households, 27% cited lower housing purchase price or rent rate as the reason for moving to the rural area.
And depending on where you are, it can be super rural or close enough.
Yes.
But we all know that the reality is absolutely nothing even close to the movie. Who says farm to table is easy?
It's super difficult.
And she uses so many ingredients.
I know.
And this is her hometown, meaning that she has the help of her friends from her childhood, right? If you don't have that, it's like starting from scratch and you have no friends you've made in adulthood. Why do we assume everyone will be nice? That's so far from the truth.
That's true. And also, she's only making food for herself. But when you have to make money out of it, it's a totally different conversation from there.
This is a really good point.
Right.
She has a home in this hometown that's left by her mother, so she doesn't have to pay for rent.
Right.
She doesn't have to make money there necessarily at first, right? So these are very realistic angles to pop goes your bubble.
Right.
Are these people living at least something close to a little forest life? Do they get to live off of, I don't know, some romance, some beauty?
Well, I'm pretty sure there are some romances in their lives, but unfortunately, the reality is different from the scenes in the movie, of course. It was found that the majority of returning farmers had a low income level immediately after returning to the farm, and it took a long time to recover to the level of income of what they earned before going to farming.
But we also assume that there might be less expenses overall, right? The
that's
rent
true.
is a little bit more affordable. Still, you don't break even for a really long time.
Right.
Okay.
The average annual household income of returning farm households was about 37 million won before returning farming, but it was found that it decreased by 10 million won to 27 in the first year of returning to farming.
Okay.
So the income of farmers in the fifth year of returning to farming was calculated to be 34 million won. So in other words, it takes at least 5 years after returning to farm to expect the level of income just as the level of when you're living back in the city.
So 5 years just to come close to breaking even.
Yes, right.
Okay.
So of course here, inflation rates are not taken into account. So when taken into account, the gap might be wider, right?
Even bigger. Now, another bigger problem is that the overall revenue of farmers is continuously decreasing. So it's not just even those who just picked up farming, for farmers in general.
Right, in general. It was lower than what people had expected now, but their revenue seems like it's going to go down further. In 2019, the agricultural income of returning farm households was about 19 million won. The non-farm income was about 11 million won. And the ratio of agricultural income to farm household income income was 57%. However, agricultural income last year was only 15 million won, not much different from the non-farm income of 14 million won. The share of agricultural income in farm households income was only 47%, so which was less than half. Even the survey shows in return to farm households, 41% of households chose income as the most difficult part related to returning to farming. Spending has also decreased as well, and the average monthly living cost of returning households has dropped from 2.5 million won before returning to farm to 1.7 million won after returning to farm.
Is there a reason why the income is lower for the people who are returning to farming compared to, I don't know, farmers who have dedicated their life to it?
Well, first of all, it's only natural for the farmers who have been doing this for their entire lives to have the bigger revenue. Of course, they're the experts, longer experience, better harvest.
They have tricks up their sleeves.
Right.
Sometimes it's even passed down generations. And how do you outperform that?
Right. However, there's also another fundamental problem.
Okay.
Another reason for the low agricultural income of returning farmers is that unlike other farmers, they cannot be incorporated into the local production system in the production process, such as harvesting and distribution.
Okay.
So the membership rate of the local agricultural cooperatives, which plays an important role in agriculture, is only around 50% of the returning farmers. So the vicious cycle is repeated, right? You cannot go into the cycle, therefore your harvest is bad, your income goes down, right?
Okay.
In which income cannot increase due to a lack of professional support for the difficulties experienced by returning farmers, such as lack of farming skills, experience, and funds.
So the odds are already stacked up against you. You don't have the expertise, you lack farming skills, you lack the experience, you lack the funds, you lack the network, which is the local agricultural co-ops. A lot does go into a good year of harvest, doesn't it? And everything is against you if you're just relocating. Experts are saying that the problem all Kinongins are facing as we speak is that the relevant ministries seem to be interested only in how much the number of returning farmers having. This is a good point because it's a headline, isn't it?
Of course.
It's sensationalized to an extent. The government is also very interested in decentralizing, and this works in their advantage, but that's also kind of misleading.
Of course. At least two related statistics are prepared and published every year by the National Statistics Office and the Ministry of Agriculture for surveys on the trend and actual conditions of the population of Gwinongin. However, no follow-up surveys have been made on how continuously returning farmers and returning villagers remain in those rural areas. So what's the turnover rate for them? We have not done any research for that. And the proportion of returning to the city after returning to farming has not been surveyed or studied. So we don't know who's coming back to the city after moving back to the rural areas.
So in short, Kinongin, or the life of a Kinongin, or returning farmers, we don't know how sustainable that system is.
Right.
It would take years for us to compile the relevant data, right? Because we can't do it in the course of just a few years.
Of course.
Eventually a follow-up will be required. We're just not there yet, not even close.
I mean, I mentioned that it takes 5 years to, return to your usual income. So at least we have to wait for 5 years and then see if they come back to city or not, right?
But at that point, wouldn't you say, if you start to turn profit, that is, at manageable levels before the relocation, then wouldn't you want to stay? Because the most difficult part of that is, I would assume, over.
Right, but then, as a human being, after 5 years, you'll be like, oh, I'm done with this. I need the city life again.
The average is 5 years at the very least.
Right.
So apparently you're supposed to see it through. Now, how many of those who relocate can see it through is an entirely different set of questions.
Yeah, so we have to wait for a long time to see if how many people are coming back to the city or not.
Oh, man.
Right.
Okay, so follow-up and supplemental survey is necessary to find out how successful the returnees are to settle down in new agricultural lifestyle, function as a member of a rural community.
Right, for sure. It's just best for people and the government, when those who are thinking about going to the rural areas to live, to get all the information they need, good or bad, to make a sound decision before making a decision to move to the rural area, right? Because it's a waste of time, energy, and social costs for everyone if their decision doesn't work out as they pictured it to be.
Okay, so do your research.
Right.
Now, for those who didn't have any other options, I can understand why. This was plan B, right?
Right.
But I don't know, stating the obvious, life and fiction, life versus movies, to be differentiated.
Yeah, for those of you who haven't watched The Little Forest, it's not a reality, so keep that in mind.
Is that a message to our producer?
Oh, no. No. To everyone.
To everyone. Thank you, Diane.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Take care. I'll see you tomorrow. We have Sion joining us in the studio next for our People segment.